G'day folks, Ben from Snowy's here today showing you how to set up and pack away this Dometic Santorini FTK 4x8 TC Inflatable Tent.
Hit it.
Durability of canvas. It's got that inflatable frame which is really forgiving, super easy to pack up and really easy to pack down. Before we dive into this product, there is loads more content like this on our YouTube channel, so make sure you like and subscribe and you'll get notified of all of our latest content. Now let's jump in. So this is how the 4x8 tent looks in the bag. This is an oversized bag, so it's packed up like this from the factory. So you've got plenty of room if you don't quite pack it up small enough, but it's roughly about 80 centimeters in length and about 45 centimeters in height and width. It's going to change, as I mentioned, depending on how tightly you roll that up. Now it weighs about 31 kilos in the bag, and that's with the pump and all the pegs and everything in there. The tent itself alone weighs around about 28 kilos. So if you're allowing about 30 kilos in your vehicle weight, you're pretty accurate. We'll start by showing you what comes in the bag. Now there's little compression straps on the bag here, so you can pack it up nice and compact so things aren't rolling around inside the bag. We'll start, I'll unzip this, pull everything out, lay it out, and we'll show you what's inside. So this is everything in the bag. The bag's quite good. It's quite heavy duty and it zips right open flat, so you can roll the tent inside easily, and you get everything secured with a couple of straps here, instruction manual, and you also get a few little repair patches and glue and that sort of thing in there if you do have any damage to the fabric. Now this is the tent all in one. It's the beauty of the air tents is you don't have the fly sheet and everything separate. It's all in one. This is going to all assemble as one piece, so you don't have two separate things in the bag. Got a bag with a heap of pegs in it. They're reasonable pegs, not super heavy duty. Always handy to chuck a few really heavy duty pegs in if you're in anywhere with really hard ground, but these are going to be more than suitable for most caravan parks or grassy areas, and there's heaps of pegs in that bag there. And then you get the pump here that you can use to inflate your tent. It comes assembled this far. So you get the pump, all of this is included in here, and then the hose on here, which just screws onto the top of the handle there. So just a couple of turns to put that on, and the pump's there ready to go. On the end of the pump, a few different attachments that you can use for not just the tent, but various other things to inflate as well. I have a feeling this is the one we're going to use to inflate the tent, but we'll find out when we get to the inflation port. Now, the first thing I'm going to do to set it up is spread the tent out here on top of the Santorini ground sheet that I've got set up behind me here. I've got that loosely pegged out. The peg points in the corners do line up with the tent. So I'll lay this out, get the orientation right, and we'll peg the main portion of the tent out first. So I've just oriented the tent here. Now, for reference, probably the easiest way to work out which way is the front when it's all rolled up is to go by the label here, which faces the front. So this is the door under the awning. And then this light colored fabric here is actually attached to the awning at the front. So this is going to be the front of my tent, or the entrance to my tent. Now from here, the first thing we do is peg it out. So there's 3 peg points down the side, one on each corner, one in the middle, and then one at the rear. I'm going to put all those in place, and then we can inflate the frame. So each of the peg points has got this sort of guy system here, which is all sort of interconnected to the guy ropes on the tents, but the base pegs go through these little plastic triangles here. So there's one of those on each corner. So I'll put 6 pegs in place. Now there's another peg at the rear as well that I haven't put in place. I recommend you put as many pegs in place as you can. So now the next thing to do is inflate the tent. Now there's 3 inflation points for this portion of the tent, which is the enclosed weather protected section of the tent. There's 3 poles and they each feature down this side of the tent. So this is an inflation port here. So I'll grab the pump in a second, but first we want to set each of these valves up. There's a few different parts to these valves here. At the moment this is completely open, so this is just a hole straight into the tube that goes up and over the tent, and that's how it would be when you deflate it. That lets the air out as quick as possible. And there's a center section here that allows us to inflate it without the air coming out. So this screws into place here. So to inflate it, we want this one screwed into place, firmly in place, so you don't want the air to escape. And in the bottom of there, on the bottom of that, is a one-way valve that allows the air to go in and not come back out. So I'm going to go to each 3 of these valves on this portion of the tent, screw this in, grab my pump, and we can start inflating it. Right, the pump. Now, looking at the attachments on the ends here, we've got various attachments as mentioned for floaties or whatever you want to use it for, but the one we need for the tent is this one here. We put that in the end of the hose here, there's a little locator pin there, just twist that into place, and then that just pushes firmly into this valve here. You don't have to push it too hard, just enough so that it sits in there by itself. Now we're going to inflate these to 8 PSI, and there's a gauge on the pump to help us with that. These have been tested up to about 18 PSI, so well in excess of what you pump this up to. And even if you've got it, you say you pump it up to 8 PSI in cooler weather, and then you have it sitting out in the warmer weather, they've also tested that, and I think the maximum they got it to is something like 12 PSI. So it's still well within the realms of what would be the limits of the bladders inside of these airframes here. Now, as we pump, this valve, you'll notice, goes up and down. It doesn't actually stay in place, so we can't see it now until I get a bit of pressure in it. But I'm going to pump this up, and we'll see that this valve goes up on the downstroke and then goes back to 0 when I stop pumping. So we just need to keep an eye on where this is at, and it needs to be in the green zone here. If I spin this around, you can see there's black, then green, and then red. So we just need to try and get it pumped up within the green zone here. So we'll start pumping this pole up, and I'll show you what it looks like once we've got a bit of pressure in there. Okay, so as you're pumping, it might look a bit funny, but this is quite normal. It's going to take more shape once the center pole comes into place, but you might find you need to just give it a little bit of a hand to start to take shape. So before it's completely inflated, just pull it out as best you can. And I'll show you how this gauge is looking on here now. So if I pump this again now, you'll see on my downstroke, this will come up to roughly or closer to the 10 mark there, but I'm aiming for around about that 8 to 9 PSI in the green area here. And that means this frame will be pumped up. So I'll do that once more. You can see that came up to close to the 10 there. So pressure's good in this frame here, or this pole here. So I'm going to take the pump out of this pole here. There's a cap here that we can now do up just to seal all the air in there, because that's all we need to do with this one now. Now we do the same thing with the center hoop and the front hoop, and that'll be the back section of the tent all set up. So it's starting to take shape now. It's a good idea to make sure a door or a window is unzipped as you're inflating this to allow air to go into the tent, so the frame's not working against sort of a vacuum inside the tent. So just make sure the door or one of the windows is open a little bit so air can come inside the tent. So we've got the 3 poles for the main weather protection section of the tent set up. I'm not going to worry about the awning just yet. I'm going to go around and put the guy ropes in because it's not freestanding. There are 3 hoops here. So without these, it's not going to stand up by itself. So to make sure it takes proper shape, I'm going to put pegs in each of these guy ropes. So there's 6 of these and 1 at the rear for a bit of tension. So there's 1 here, 1 on each pole, and 1 at the rear here. Now these are really good guy ropes. They're a strap rather than a rope. There's a peg point at the bottom here, which when you peg this out, keeps it nice and taut across the floor of the tent to make sure that's spread out. And then this section here is adjustable at the top here through a tri-glide strap. So it's 1 peg point, nice and easy, big peg point there. Then you can adjust each of these really easily. So they just come straight out from the poles on 6 points around the tent. Now I miscounted pegs, but at the rear here, I need 2 extras. So I think I said 6 or 7 total, but I need 2 more because at the rear, there are these 3 main peg points. These need to be pegged out. This one, it's sort of an angle. You just sort of follow the natural flow of this out this way. A center one here and the same on the other side. Also note that there's a few peg points that I've taken shortcuts today. I haven't pegged this one here at the rear out, but if you set it for a long period of time, in particular, use all of these, it's going to stop all the fabric flapping around. So got to put 3 pegs in along the back here. It's going to keep the back of the tent firmly in place. So when we set the awning up out the front and pull the tension that way so the awning stays tight, there's going to be a nice lengthways tension on the tent to make sure there's no sagging of the fabric. All of these guy ropes have peg points here as well that I'm taking shortcuts today, not pegging all of these out. But there are so many peg points in this for you to peg down and tighten sections up to stop fabric flapping around to make sure this tent is really secure and really well pitched. It's also important to note that you might find that the initial pegs that you put in place have moved a little. We can see this one's on a bit of an angle here. Just since we've set the tent up and the poles inflated, it shifted a bit. So just go around, once you've got all of these guy ropes in place, adjust these pegs and also just adjust the tension on the guy rope so the tent's sitting nice and even. It's not lopped over one side or the other. All of these have got an even tension to keep the tent nice and even. So we've sort of got 2 options to finish this off here at the moment. It might depend on the weather at the time. So we could go and put these points in place. So these sit at a 45-degree angle out this way to hold this frame up in front here. And then we've kind of got this fabric hanging down loose in the front of the tent here. So what I'm going to do though is inflate this pole here first, and then use this peg point to kind of pull the tent out like this, and then put the final guy ropes in, make some adjustments, and the tent's as good as set up by then. So it's the same deal with the pole here. It's the same as the poles to the rest of the tent. It's got one valve on the side here. We screw that inner section in, or the middle section in, place the pump into the valve here, and we pump this one up to around about 8.5 psi as well. For reference sake, it's about 35, maybe up to 40 pumps to go up to about 8.5 psi for this guy, so it's not a lot of effort. So I'll just put the cap back on this pump here, back on this valve, sorry, and we're done with the pump for today, so we can put that aside back in the car. And I'm now going to get this center point here. This is a main guy rope that's running along the length of the tent. I'll peg this out to the front here. So that's now created nice tension along the length of the tent. What I'm going to do before I put all of those in is just pull this out. These straps are attached here just to give you a guide on where this should sit. But if you pull this out so that they sit firm, then there's a peg point in the corner here. That's going to pull that out to be in the right spot before we put the guy ropes in. Then I've got 2 more guy ropes on the pole to the back here to put out. A few more guy ropes, one on each corner here or the top. Another one part way down there. So that's all the guy ropes all in place there. So the tent's pretty much set up. Just make sure they're all not over tight, and you don't want to collapse this down, but just firm. But there's enough tension in this to create lengthwise tension on the tent. There is a few extra peg points around the base, as I mentioned a few times, that I haven't used. So there's peg points here just to hold this out if you like, and another one in the base of the tent there just to keep that nice and taut inside. If we have a walk around the side of the tent, I'll show you the other things that you can set up at this stage. Each of the pump covers has got little sort of studs on it, so you can collapse them down to keep them well protected if you like. So that just covers that to keep the valve nice and protected. There are little kickstands here underneath these flaps here, which are vents. You can go around and set those up if you like. You probably want them set up most of the time because that allows ventilation through the tent there. There's more covers on each of these valves here. Another vent here with kickstands that you can set up. And at the rear, you've got this large window that runs right across the back of the tent. You can set this up in a few different ways. Firstly, zipped closed like this. There's little Velcro tabs here, so that gives full weather protection. Second option is to unzip it. Well, there's 2 zippers on each side here. You can unzip it so that there's this gusset stays zipped up here. You can peg it out with these guy ropes here to allow ventilation through the tent. There's a window here. Alternatively, unzip the gusset as well. You can remove these guy ropes if you like, so you don't have them flapping around in the way. You can take them right off and then roll this up and secure it with these tabs. 3 tabs across the top there. So you've got open window for ventilation right through the rear of the tent. So just have a walk around the tent once you're all done and make sure all these guy ropes are all just sharing the tension around the tent. It's even, so the tent's not lopsided one way or the other. They're not done up really tight. They're just done up firmly enough to give support if the wind kicks into these poles here. And these are really firm. That's the beauty of the air poles. If the wind does pick up, they'll bend down, but then they pop back into place. But these don't need to be done really tight to offer the support it needs in the wind. That is the Santorini FTK 4x8 TC tent from Dometic, all set up. Super easy, no poles and stuff to worry about, no metal poles, just inflate it, 4 inflation ports, a bunch of pegs, you're good to go, tons of living space. Pack up is easier than set down because we don't have to pump the poles up, we just take the valves out, deflate it, pull the pegs out and roll it up. Now we don't need to be as concerned with an air pole tent with leaving as many pegs in place, because if the wind picks up an air pole tent, it flexes and pops back into place. That being said, I'm going to start by pulling out the 4 guy ropes down each side and the 2 guy ropes on the corners at each end, but I'm going to leave the pegs in the base in all 6 spots for now. Next step is to let the poles down. So I come to each of the valves here, and if I unscrew this top valve, nothing's going to happen because it's a one-way valve in there. What I actually need to do to let the pole down is screw this center section out, and it's going to open, it's already hissing, it's going to open the valve up completely, and this pole is going to deflate really quickly and collapse down. So I do that on each of the poles, and that'll be the tent flat in the ground. So I'll go and take out the last 2 guy ropes at each end, take out all the pegs around the corners or around the sides. So next thing to roll it up, I'll throw the awning on top of the tent, then fold it all in about the width of the bag. And what I want to do is roll, because the valves are on this side, so I want to roll from that side to this side so I keep squeezing the air out of the poles. I'm going to roll the pump up inside the tent, just keeps it a bit protected. But before I do that, I'm going to detach the hose. Maybe just sort of put it in there so it's not too folded. You don't want to have one sort of spot that folds too much on the pump there. So sort of wrap it around a little bit. Try and roll it up as firm as you can. The tighter you roll it, the easier it is to go back in the bag, but it's an oversized bag anyway, so we should be able to get it back in pretty easily. The straps are even long enough to go around it quite easily. Now, let's see how this goes back in the bag. So I'm going to open the bag right up, roll the tent on top of the bag and zip it over. That is how to set up and pack away the Dometic Santorini FTC 4x8, or FTK, sorry, 4x8 TC Inflatable Tent. That was pretty easy. For a big tent, that was pretty easily done by myself. You don't have to worry about weather, breaking poles or bending poles. And I reckon this is a perfect option for anyone who wants a single tent that's going to cover both touring as well as family camping, because it gives you the space and livability that you want in a family camping tent, but it gives you the durability and ease of setup that you want in a touring tent. Awesome tents from Dometic. Check them out online at snowies.com.au where you find them at our lowest prices every day.